All right, boys, welcome back to the Order Flow Bootcamp. This is going to be day 11, and what we're going to talk about today is one of my favorite setups called the low volume node continuation setup. But before we begin, if you guys haven't subscribed yet and you are liking this bootcamp, please subscribe and like the video. Most of you guys watching aren't subscribed. If you are, I really appreciate it. I hope that my videos help you and they're just going to keep coming. So let's talk about low volume nodes now. So I already mentioned the low volume node continuation setup, but that is more of an intraday formation of a low volume node. So if you remember back to my volume profile video, this is what a low volume node could look like. So let's imagine this is a session profile. Here's an area of fair value, and then we'll say it looks like that. So this right here is going to be a low volume node. Obviously, the name speaks for itself. It is an area on the profile where very little business was conducted, where there were not many transactions compared to down here or up here. So this is going to serve as a location of interest to us as scalpers. But one thing I do want to mention, let's just imagine that this is a daily profile right here. You can use this low volume area pretty much the same way I'm about to show you on a session profile. So to put it very simply, what you're looking to happen is you're looking for this area to either reject, or you're looking for this area to get aggressively moved through. And then this could potentially be your line in the sand for bullish above or bearish below. So I'm going to go into that a little bit more in this video, and then I'm going to show you guys some actual setups from Bookmap replay data of low volume nodes that have occurred recently. One thing that I was already kind of mentioning was sometimes I'm going to use them as a point of interest if it's like a daily profile. Most of the time, the trades that I take that I call low volume node continuation setups, they're going to form intraday. So let's just say we have a trading session, and I'm just going to erase all of this. But let's just say we have a trading session, we open up and we kind of consolidate after the open. What we can anticipate to happen, since the profile in this example, you're going to see the bulk of value build where we consolidate. That's what happens whenever more transactions happen. Obviously, the volume builds. So what we can wait for is a breakout of this value that is forming during the session. This particular setup I'm going to show you first is the low volume node continuation. So let's just say we do break out, and then we start to consolidate up here. So all of this aggression from buyers is going to create an area of low volume. And now the profile is going to look something like this, where we consolidated up here, we built some value up here, and now there is this gap in fair value. So a fair value gap, I'm sure a lot of you guys have heard that, is literally a low volume node. It's not a gap per se, but it's literally just the distance in between where most of the volume was transacted. So this is like a perfect example. Sometimes it's going to look a little bit less perfect than this. You guys will see that for yourself, but the whole moral of the story of how we're going to use this level to play off of is we are first going to look to take it long, in this case for a continuation setup where we get buyers come in here and defend price right here. Or what can happen is if this level were to break, this can possibly serve as a place for sellers to reload and continue down to the bottom of the previous fair value. So those are kind of like the two ways you can think about it, but really the main way I like to use them when they form intraday like this is they become a place of interest where I can say it's like my line in the sand. So like if we break below it, I'm going to flip my overall narrative to I want to see if sellers really reload here. But before that, we are first looking at these areas for continuation. I'm going to show you some setups later on in this video, like I said, of these actually happening in real time. And you'll see what I mean here, and we'll go over the context, the confluence, the confirmation signals, and everything. Before we go into these setups, you need to understand that this isn't something that you're just going to use blindly without any key levels. Let's say, for example's sake, that this box is a supply zone. Let's say we trade up here like this. If we have a low volume node right here, it might be something that you want to avoid or maybe wait to break if it's like right next to a supply zone. Same thing, vice versa. Like if we were coming down into a demand zone and an LVN forms right above a demand zone, that might be something I'm cautious of, and I might not look to find continuation in that zone. It just depends on the context. So what I have found to work the best, and this is what I was taught when I first learned about low volume areas, is let's say we have a demand zone in this case. So this box is a demand zone. Let's say we come down into demand and then we get some consolidation. It's a really bad consolidation, but say we get consolidation, then we get a move up, and now we're consolidating here. This would be a perfect instance of whenever continuation would be high probability. So if you didn't catch it long off a demand for whatever reason, and then you get an LVN, you can look for continuation inside of this LVN for buyers to reload or buyers to defend price for a further continuation move. And this is the best way to use it right here. You want to use them the way I trade, obviously supply and demand, and you can use context and however you look at the higher time frame market in your own eyes. I don't know, it doesn't have to specifically apply to supply and demand, but this is how I was taught. And basically the point I'm trying to make is you want to be taking these trades in areas that align with the context of the market. You don't want to look for a bullish continuation inside of a supply zone. That's not necessarily the smartest thing. If it's a demand zone, different story. Obviously, that's a great trade. You don't want to just put trades on firstly without any confirmation in an LVN regardless, but on top of that, you want to make sure the location makes sense and that it aligns with the context. That's the best way you can use these. So like I said, this can happen vice versa the same way. Let's say we have a supply zone now. Let's say we come up into supply, come down. We can look for a continuation setup in this LVN for sellers to reload to take it short for a continuation move. And the same thing goes, like I said before, if we had an LVN, something like this, and now there's an LVN, but we're inside of demand, obviously taking this for a continuation short would be lower probability. So one thing you got to take away is make sure you are taking these trades when they align with the context, when they are in a good location. There's going to be LVNs that form that get disrespected. I'll tell you that right now. This isn't something like you see an LVN and it's an automatic continuation play. There are going to be LVNs that get disrespected and inversed. So that's another scenario that can happen if we had like an LVN and maybe the location wasn't good, or maybe it just straight up gets disrespected and maybe we do have a little pop off of it, but we couldn't take the high day out, or we couldn't move on to the next key level, or the buying was weak, or the buying gets trapped, whatever it may be. And then we come back down and we just completely blow through this LVN. You want to be aware of situations like this because they can happen and they do happen. And this is why I kind of say like we're using it as a line in the sand. The way LVNs work is they're either going to be rejection zones or price is going to move through them very quickly because there's no volume traded there. Yeah, sometimes if you see an LVN just get blown through like this, you may have an opportunity to take it short now as like an inverse where clearly sellers in this case have taken control and buyers are not in control anymore. So I literally took this setup, and this is essentially exactly what happened. We had an LVN. We tried to bounce off of it one time. Buyers got trapped right here. We actually tried another time. Didn't get that continuation move we wanted. And eventually we broke right through it. And I was able to identify trapped buyers at this LVN to take it short. Really just having an open mind with what can happen. It's not a guaranteed continuation play. Same thing. It's not a guaranteed inverse play. Like it's not necessarily going to get blown through every time. You got to have an open mind and you have to align the setup with the context of the market and make sure the location actually makes sense. So those are probably the biggest takeaways for any setup really, but specifically because we're talking about LVNs, that's like one of the best pieces of advice I can give you guys. So I'll show you guys my LVN continuation playbook and what I actually like to look for specifically to confirm a continuation play. As you guys know, with order flow, it is a little bit more subjective. It's a little bit more discretional. And these are not like the exact same thing isn't going to happen every single time. So there's a few ways you can confirm that buyers are reloading in this LVN or buyers are going to be defending, or sellers if it's to the downside. But the main things that I like to look for is I like to look for passive orders coming in at the LVN. I'll show you guys examples of what I'm saying in a few minutes here. So this is basically how I like to look for continuation setups. I like to see a bounce off of a supply or demand level first that creates an LVN. I like to see the LVN get created with significant volume. Sometimes you'll have an LVN that gets created, but it's not on significant volume, meaning there aren't large participants actually creating the LVN. That's one thing I've just picked up on. It doesn't happen as much, but that's one thing I've picked up on. And obviously the next thing is you're waiting for a retracement into the LVN. And that's whenever you want to spot passive participants and aggressive participants. You could spot absorption. You could spot a CVD divergence. You could spot very weak selling. Any way to confirm, any way you can validate that there's buyers in the LVN defending those prices is really the moral of the story. My favorite way to do it though is to spot passive orders. And I'm just going to show you guys some examples right now. So here is an example of an LVN setup from Bookmap. This happened on June 18th. There was a few of these that happened in the month of June, and then definitely some in July as well. But this is a very clear example that I remember. So we're just going to replay this session real quick and watch how it develops. So if you guys saw the last video on the absorption setups, we're actually going to get a bunch of selling that is not getting rewarded right off the open. You can see that by a CVD divergence. See how we're kind of consolidating right here. The CVD puts in a lower low, but price is making a higher low. This is just seems to be a precursor for a lot of initial moves in the market, I found. But essentially what happens after that is we get a move up with very strong buying, and we create an area of low volume. So pay attention to the right side of the screen on the session volume profile right here. And I'll tell you guys when I would have really marked this out. So I always like to wait for a little bit of consolidation. I like to wait for value to build or some volume to build up here. And then I get the actual zone more clear on the profile. So right here, I can pause it and I can say, it's pretty obvious that this area of low volume is going from 52, 60, 52 down to 60, 45. I've already marked that out right here. So in this box right now, like I said, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to look for buyers to appear to play a continuation setup to get with the trend. One thing I already like is I'm seeing some passive activity in this area. So now all we got to do is wait for a retracement into this LVN for buyers to appear or these orders to get filled. And we're going to basically use our own judgment and try to identify, is the buying strong in here or is it weak? So first off, we already got passive liquidity in this level. That's already step number one. So we got passive orders transacting, some actually failing to fill even down here at the 48s, which is a good sign for buyers. I might have already taken this already after I seen this larger aggressive order at the 60-50. Because we already have the passive orders and now some aggression is really what I want to see come in now to move the market actually. So I'm just going to let this play out for a second. And so another thing that I'm noticing whenever I zoom out a little bit is see how the CVD, it's kind of moving down, but it's not really moving down a lot. That's a good sign that this pullback was just weaker selling and that these buyers are still going to be factored into the market. So let's just say the first sign of this aggression, you got long at 50-50. My stop loss is going to go right below this 60-48 low right here. That's going to offer me a 2-point risk on this specific setup. The main point is that if price trades below this 48, it's going to invalidate the current trade idea And the current trade idea is that we are going to get a move up for continuation off of this low. If we take this low out, we can still look for continuation if it sets up again. But for this particular entry, what would invalidate your thesis is a stop loss below the low. If you want to invalidate the entire LVN continuation setup, you could put your stop loss all the way down at 60.45. But obviously that's a lot more of risk that you're gonna have to take on. And you could get a way better risk reward if you would have just used this low. So what happens next is that aggressive buying is coming in now, and we are basically just gonna wait here for our target to get hit. And on this particular trade, my first target, I'm gonna scale some out at 60.60. And as far as what happens after that, I'm gonna wait for some orders to appear. Or if there was a key level that I had above, then I would obviously target that. But just using Bookmap, I like to target limit orders. So my first partial or my first TP would be right here at 60.60, probably just below, maybe 59.50. In this case, it fills. So that would have been the first TP right there. And at this point, you can go break even on the trade. And then the next TP is great here at 60.65. So that would have been a 3-point risk for a 15-point reward on the trade. And that would have literally been, I would have gotten all out right there on that push through these 60.65s. So that is a perfect example of an LVN continuation setup. So I'm going to pull up the one from yesterday that actually inverse. I'm going to show you some red flags you could have been on the lookout for, or some red flags you could have taken into account before you started looking for continuation, or if you did try to take it for continuation afterwards when it became invalidated, in my opinion. So while this is filling out, if you guys don't have Bookmap and you want Bookmap, I have a link in the description for a discount link for Bookmap if you're interested in that. I use the Global Plus membership, so if you want to support the channel, you can use that. I don't really care if you do or don't. I know how people feel about affiliate codes or affiliate links and all that stuff, but all right, so what's going to happen here is we are in the process of forming a low volume area right here on the right. And like I said, we are first going to look for continuation off of it, but it can also get inverse, and we just have to be aware of that. So at this point, I'm marking it out. At this point, it's pretty obvious to me that it starts at like 407, 408, and it goes down to 97. So this is how I would mark it out right here. And even possibly even bring it up to 410, where these offers were right here. That would make sense as well. So let's just say this is our area of low volume now, that we want to look for a continuation opportunity inside of it. We definitely had some passive activity at the 410s, 409s that did not all the way fill. I didn't take this trade because I wanted a more of a deeper retrace into this LVN. You could have potentially taken it there. I wouldn't have taken it like I just said, but you do get a little bit of a bounce. And I was actually reading this in the moment as some buyers putting in effort that was not getting rewarded. Whenever this happens above a low volume area, it's kind of, you want to be cautious of that, because this is just going to add fuel to the fire if sellers step in. So like if there's a ton of trap buyers up here and sellers step in, this level could get broken pretty easily. So this was one reason why I didn't take it on this next retest right here, which it didn't look bad at all, but that was one thing I was kind of hesitant, or that was one thing that actually made me hesitant on this next test, where we're going to fill some orders down here. And this was more of the retest or retrace into the LVN that I was looking for. But like I said, this kind of turned me off to it. So this was the second time we bounced off of this area. And then once again, for a third time, we come down here, we fill some passive orders. There's some aggressive selling that's not moving price, and we get another bounce off the LVN. We've already tried to bounce off this LVN 3 different times, once, twice, 3 times right now. It actually looked pretty good. We had some absorption going on down here, some passive bids coming in, And this actually looked really good for a bounce off the LVN. If you took it, you would have gotten a perfect, if you would have executed this perfectly, you could have walked away with around a 12-point profit off of this. But I guarantee you, if I took that, I would have been going for high day, and at most I would have gotten partials out on that trade. So after this little push fails, we have that weaker buying up here. At this moment, I was thinking, all right, this LVN is probably going to get disrespected now. It's probably going to get sold right through. I waited for that to happen, and clearly that's happening as we speak. And now that this LVN has been completely broken, now we can potentially look for sellers to reload somewhere in here to take it short for a continuation short setup. And this is the trade that I showed you guys yesterday in that absorption example that I did take. So obviously a ton of buying getting trapped right at the bottom to middle end of this low volume area. And this ended up in a continuation move to the downside. So I know that was probably a lot of information to take in all at once. But the moral of the story is that LVNs are a great point of interest to use, but you don't want to be thinking that it's automatically going to result in a continuation move. It definitely will a lot of the time. Sometimes it's going to get completely disrespected and either bought right through or sold right through. And the way I view that is they're going to be the opposing side taking control. And if it doesn't, like if we never got this continuation sell-off right here, we could also just fill this in and form a larger area of balance on, sorry, I'm blocking everything. We could also have filled this in and just balanced up here in this range at the same time. There's no strategy that's a holy grail, but this is a really good setup that can offer you a high probability trade using low volume nodes. So if you guys are getting value out of this bootcamp, if that video was helpful to you, make sure you subscribe to the channel, leave a like. Order Flow Discord is free and it's in the description of this video. And I will catch you guys in the next one.